Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you about one quick thing before we get started on tonight's story. Tonight's story is written by Kyle Harrison, who is a featured author as well as many other authors that you may have heard on this channel, in a new book available now on Amazon in Kindle and paperback called Forbidden Dreams. They are nightmares that can't be forgotten, mysteries that should be left unsolved, and open the door to forbidden knowledge and peer into its mouth of madness itself in this new collection of cosmic horror from over 20 award-winning authors. You can find a link to it in the description down below. And now, on to tonight's story. Growing up, our family, like most, had a tradition of summer vacation. Mom and Dad worked for the school district, so they can plan for a few weeks of relaxation without much worry. One of the places I remember the most is a lake nestled back in central Washington state. It was literally a slice of paradise, and the few times we did go there, we never wanted to leave. Recently, I'd been thinking a lot about the carefree nature of my childhood and how nice it would be for our own family to get away for a while. So I paid my dad a visit, and I brought up the lake. His response wasn't exactly what I expected. "You must be thinking of a different family you had, Ed. We never went to any sort of campsite," he insisted. This puzzled me, especially since I was sure that we had taken a couple of photos during the summers we went, and I asked if I could get out his old photo albums. Ever since my mom passed, it's been hard for him to look through old pictures. So I told him that I would take them home and I'd bring them back when I was done. I think it was 3 albums in all, filled to the brim with nostalgic memories of our trips to the Grand Canyon, the Florida coast, even to Washington, D.C. But after scouring every single picture for an entire night, I was surprised to see that my dad was right. I found none that appeared to be taken near a lake or a patch of woods. Had I really just dreamed up the whole experience? I admitted I was feeling a little silly for it all at first. "Your dad has a weird way of organizing those," my wife said as I finished the last album. "Well, look at the date, silly. June 1994, then it skips to September. He does the same thing several times with gaps in the album," she muttered, showing me the blank pages. I was surprised I hadn't noticed before. It was too much of a coincidence, so when I returned them, I brought it up. "Hey, Dad, did you take out the pictures we took from Washington State? I mean, I noticed there were some gaps in the book," I said. This time, his response was frustration. "Eddie, just leave it alone, please," he told me. "Dad, come on. All I want to do is take the boys up for a fishing trip," I insisted. Now, this got his attention, and he grabbed the edge of my shirt. "Not there, you don't. Don't ever get on the water. Not ever." His eyes were wide and frightened, and his response actually surprised me. "Okay. Sure. I'm sorry I brought it up," I muttered. He relaxed his hands and brushed his clothes before responding. "You should never have gone there, Eddie. I tried so hard to forget it, but after all these years, it won't be forgotten." "Dad, you're scaring me. I don't remember anything bad happening when we went there." "Look, I made sure you and your brother were taken care of. Wasn't that enough? Why do you want to go back now?" He seemed delirious, and I considered offering to get his usual night prescriptions, but something about his ranting was clicking in my brain. My memories of this place were vague at best, but I had to have been at least 11 or 12, so why didn't I have the ability to latch on to any solid point in my subconscious? I'm not too sure. It's just the boys were getting to be around the same age as when you took us. I figured it would be a nice trip, I admitted. But even saying the word sounded odd now. I hadn't been thinking about this until recently. Like, the memory had resurfaced somehow. "I won't tell you. I refuse to, you hear me? Now go home, forget about that damn lake, take a trip somewhere else instead, Disneyland or something." I told him I would. Despite the fact that I still didn't understand his outburst, I was determined to obey. Thinking about the lake now made me uncomfortable. Had something happened there, and my father had wanted us to collectively forget it? The next day, he passed. I was the one that found him and called 911. It was an overdose. The medical examiner told me when they came to collect the body. I remember thinking, I wish I had gotten a chance to apologize for opening old wounds. He knew you meant well, my wife told me. But my mind still lingered on the lake. He talked about it. Had talking about it caused too much stress for Dad? And was there something hidden there that he was desperate to keep from me? My own recollections were still fuzzy, so when the funeral was over, I was somewhat glad to discover that he was allowing me to take custody of his house and all the memories within. Maybe I could finally put to rest the unease about an old camping trip by finding the photos. A few weeks passed. Winter settled in, and the kids went out of school. I sorted through most of Dad's things with little success. It was evident that whatever he had done with the photos, he hadn't kept them here. Then my wife approached me with a surprise. "I think I found the perfect spot for that camping trip that you wanted so badly," she said, showing me a brochure that she had printed off. "Lake Veritas," the bold font proclaimed. "Truth can be found here." I know this is going to sound strange, but when I saw the photo on the front of the pamphlet, it felt like a bolt of lightning hit my body. The picture was one I remembered instantly, despite it being over 20 years old. We had taken it near the docks of the lake that I had tried so hard to get Dad to remember. "That's me," I told my wife breathlessly. She looked at me puzzled, not knowing the context of the conversation I had with my father, and insisted she had already booked us a cabin there for 3 days. I thought it best to go rather than make waves. I knew she meant well, and this actually seemed like the sort of closure I needed for my dad. I mean, maybe being on the shores of the lake could do that for me. So I took his ashes with me, and we drove to the lake the next weekend. Forest surrounded us the moment that we left the main highway. And in many ways, it felt like we were entering a whole new world. The kids oohed and awed at every wild animal they saw galloping through the woods. My wife chuckled and rubbed my shoulder. "This doesn't seem so bad," she told me. I smiled as I used the brochure to take the right turns to get to our campsite. Curiously, nothing was pulling up on Google Maps, and it made me a little nervous. Secluded and private, a place that no one knew about. So far, it was checking all the boxes for definitely being the same one I went to as a kid. And as soon as we drove through a wooded picket fence to a widened gravel parking lot, I was certain of it. Fresh blue water cascaded around the west horizon. Gorgeous green hills and shrouded forests blocked the east. It felt serene, divine. But I also got this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I remembered everything about this place, but I knew nothing about it. It felt empty. Seeing my wife and children so happy, I shrugged it off. Nothing about this place looked dangerous at all. I helped my wife get our gear out of the back and breathed in the fresh air. The kids went for a hike and skipped stones. I made it clear I didn't want them to go for a swim just because of bacteria and such, but the longer we stayed, the more I felt silly of thinking anything malicious was happening here. Setting up the tent was a breeze, and before long, all 4 of us were gathering wood for a bonfire near the lake. "So you really came here as a kid?" Joey, our youngest, asked. "Yep. We used to listen to crickets for radio and count the stars till we fell asleep," I told them, as I got the fire started. It got dark pretty quick. "Did you ever tell any ghost stories?" "Oh, we shouldn't be doing any of that," my wife objected. But I didn't see the harm. After all, this whole business with being scared of the lake had actually made me think of a pretty cool urban legend analogy, so I wanted to share it. Yeah, as a matter of fact, my dad always used to tell us about the lake men, I said, gesturing towards the water. The boys got quiet and listened as I explained. Lake men look like you or me, but they have no soul. Nor any body, really. They're born from reflection, and they show the truth about what's inside us. The story goes, if you see a good reflection, you're safe, I told them matter-of-factly. What happens if you see a bad one? Joey wondered aloud. I smiled as the bonfire crackled between us. Let's just say you don't want that to happen, I said. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted and the boys jumped. All right, that's enough for now. Get in your tent, my wife said, giving me the stink eye. When we were alone, she chided me. Why'd you have to tell him that? Makes me think of my brother, she admitted angrily as we got inside our own tent. Brother? What do you mean? I asked. We settled in our sleeping bags as she let out a long sigh. Don't ask like you forgot. You know my brother died from drowning when I was a kid. She snapped at me. I felt terrible, and worst of all, for some reason, that memory had eluded me until she brought it back. It was like she used a bucket to dredge up water from the bottom of a well. How did I suppress that? She told me a dozen times about the traumatic experience. Where did he drown? I asked, as we listened to the still night. Even the crickets were gone now. I don't want to talk about it, she said, but I was insistent. Something about all of this felt very wrong. You grew up in Washington too, right? Did your family ever take you camping? I asked. Sure, plenty of times, she said. Did you ever come here before? She turned to me, her eyes confused and dark with dim light. Why would you ask that? Before I got a chance to respond, we heard a crashing noise from the lake. It sounded like someone had just taken a dive. I jumped up and grabbed the flashlight, stumbling out to the tent to shine it towards the shore. I saw the beach was disturbed, as though someone had walked barefoot to it, and then I turned to my son's tent and realized it was unzipped. Pushing it open all the way, I used the light to see that my youngest was nowhere in sight. Hugh, wake up, where's Joey? I asked him frantically. He mumbled and opened his eyes groggily, pointing toward the water. I ran towards it, trying to see if he had just gone for a swim, but I saw nothing in the murky depths except my own reflection. My wife was standing there, paralyzed with fear as I scanned the campsite, trying to see if something else could have pulled him into the water. Instead, all I could find were his own bare footprints. He had deliberately walked to the lake. We should call the police and get out of here, my wife told me. I nodded, and we got Hugh to gather up the gear as we got into the car, and I struggled to even calm down. How could I have lost him so easily? What could have caused it? We started to drive away, but we didn't make it very far. A few kilometers down the road, and a shadowy figure covered in seaweed and moss was seen emerging from the forest. It was Joey. My wife jumped out instantly and checked him. I was more cautious. He had been under the water for a while. I mean, how could he have survived? His eyes seemed pale and frightened, and when he saw me, he screamed and he fainted. Help me get him into the car, she insisted. We lifted him up, and Hugh got the door, and all I could think of was getting out of here. But the instant we placed his limp form into the car, our vehicle abruptly died. It was somewhere amid the darkness of the forest. I swear I heard laughter. What just happened? My wife asked. I shook my head. I grabbed the flashlight again, going to pop the hood and search for a logical explanation. I wasn't prepared to admit that the lake was trying to keep us from leaving, but no other answer presented itself. We need to call for a tow, I reasoned. None of us had signal. My wife sighed and told the boys to try and get some shut-eye. I mean, maybe we could walk to the service station in the morning, she said. I think after the strange circumstances we had experienced so far, just getting some shut-eye seemed like the best choice for all of us, but I couldn't sleep. I was too wound up by the lake and the strangeness of this night. I did, however, close my eyes and rest, listening to any sight or sound that was out of place. It didn't take long when I heard the soft sound of a door closing. I peeked my left eye open to see Hugh was walking towards the water where we had left. This time I followed. He stopped at the edge and took off his boots and let the lake hit his toes. Son, what are you doing? I asked as I saw him step closer into the freezing water. This time he turned to face me, and his eyes looked as dark as the sky. His mouth opened to respond, but instead, nothing but murky water poured out. I stumbled backwards, shocked to see that he looked like the urban legend I had spoken of only a few hours prior. He crawled toward me like a wild animal, and I shouted out for my wife to help. He grabbed a hold of my legs and started to pull me towards the lake. "Come with me. Finish what you started years ago," Hugh screamed. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like my father's voice. I instinctively kicked at him. I pushed him to let me go and then rushed to get away. He snarled and slithered back into the water, disappearing below the surface as I caught my breath. A moment later, a hand touched my shoulder. I flinched, thinking that it was another dark monster of the night. "What is this place?" my wife asked as her silhouette came into focus. I thought I knew the answer. But now, after all this madness, I wasn't sure. I asked her if she was all right, but she said nothing. She just kept staring at the dark lake. And I realized she was spotting something emerging from the depths behind me. I turned, expecting the demon who had taken Hugh's body to try to attack again, but this monster looked just like my wife. She stood there, extending her hand toward me and whispering, "Remember how you brought us here? How we were never meant to leave?" I felt a shudder run through my body as I realized that the woman standing next to me was a fake. She grabbed the hold of me and held me toward the edge of the water. "There's no need to fight the truth anymore. Look into your reflection. Remember what you did," the demon whispered. My feet began to move on their own until both my wife and this doppelganger held me down against the shore. Amid the still waters, I was shown memories I'd somehow suppressed, first of my childhood. My father brought us here just as I thought, but we had never left, not really. I watched in horror as the lake creatures took control of our bodies and plunged us into the dark depths, and after a few moments, the evil reflections I'd conjured up as myths emerged with whispers of the future. "Go find others. Bring them to the water. Trap them." I hadn't realized I was obeying these lingering thoughts, but now my mission was complete. My own new family would join the lake and whisper for others to find us. As I was taken into the depths again, I thought of my other son, the one who survived, whether he knew it or not. One day he too would come to this lake. Then we would all see our true reflections. Hey there, kids. It's me, MrCreepyPasta. I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to tonight's story or watching tonight's video. I appreciate it. As always, I cannot thank you enough for always being here. And if you guys would like to see more or hear more, then I'd appreciate it if you click that subscribe button. Or if you're listening on the podcast, then click the follow button. You guys like words, right? I speak words. You guys hear words. Also, did you know you can read words? They put a lot of words into things called books. And I have 2 of those on Amazon. MrCreepyPasta's Creepypasta collection. Volumes 1 and Volume 2 are available now on Amazon. If you give them a search, or you could just scroll down to the description. And as always, I want to give a big thank you to all you guys who support on Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, especially Jacob Shaffer, Jay, Zach, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Lando Higuchi, Bobby Karman, Tristain Pelton, Chase Burnett, Diana Kraus, Katrina Beisel, Kayden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, MyBodySoundsLikeRiceKrispys, AshWood, Lord of the Weebs, Miss Xandra, MrUnsettlingSpaghetti, Eurogore, Tsuji Campbell, Marco Takes Dabs 420, Stricken, Azurine Fox, Robert White, Andreas Garza, Snails Brennan, Legit Quad Feed, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Chris Levin, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Justin Johnson, 1-800-Nightmare, Unknown Nobody, Michael Scarborough, Jason Wilson, Infernal One, James Lowe, Lisa Cottrell, Jimbo the Hutt, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Brennan Wright, Someone You Love, S-Man, Kiwi the Sloth, Liam Newman, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Talon Karlik, Daniel Polson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, and if you guys would like to join them on the list of people's names I mispronounce, you can always do so at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, as well as all those fine people in the description down below who help support this channel and keep the lights on and give treats to Hylas and Hercules. You guys, as always, are the real MVPs, and I love and appreciate every single one of you who support there, or just support anywhere by watching and subbing. So good night, everybody, and sweet dreams.